Hello, and welcome back to It's Bigger Than Biotech. I'm Hriday, Executive Director of Pharma and a student at the University of Southern California.
And I'm Vishnu, a software engineer and machine learning and neuroscience researcher, aspiring to be a neurotech entrepreneur, also here at SC.
Our guest today is Dr. Hovik, the Director of USC Alfred Mann School of Pharmacy and Pharmaceutical Sciences. Dr. Hovik brings over 20 years of experience in the pharmaceutical industry, including leadership roles at Pfizer, AbbVie, to his current work helping grow USC's undergraduate program in biopharmaceutical sciences. Dr. Hovik earned his PhD in pharmaceutical sciences from the USC School of Pharmacy and has served as an adjunct professor at USC and the Keck Graduate Institute. And his background spans both academia and industry, giving him unique insights into drug discovery, drug development, and training the next generation of pharmaceutical scientists. This episode, join us in learning about the world of drug discovery and academia with Dr. Hovik. Thank you, Dr. Hovik, for being here with us today.
Thank you for that great welcome. Really appreciate it.
No, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here. We really want to learn from your insights and all your experience. So I wanted to start off by asking you about the roles you've had in the industry. And I wanted to start off by asking, could you tell us about your time at Pfizer and AbbVie and what you did there?
Would be my pleasure. Yeah, thanks again for having me. So I was at Pfizer for about 12 years, and I started there as a senior scientist initially. Then got promoted all the way up to what they call senior principal scientist. There was probably 2 promotion cycles. At that point, I transitioned to AbbVie after that, Allergan, then AbbVie, and that's where I became an associate director. And throughout those times, my role was always in a higher level in product development. So I think there is a lot of specifics to it, but I specialize in medical product development essentially.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, wow. Well, I know you've been through various different segments of the industry within the drug development aspect of it. So, you've worked in big pharma, you've also worked at startups and different stage companies. I also know you worked at Anadis, which was acquired by Roche. And what was the transition like being a scientist when a company is being acquired, especially from a small pharma to a big pharma?
Yeah, great question, Hriday. It's something that happens frequently, I want to say, especially for somebody who hasn't been in this situation before. Small pharma being acquired by big pharma, very normal thing. What happened at Anadis was, in retrospect, I had already left the company when this acquisition happened, but when Roche bought my former employer at that time, because I was at Pfizer already, they laid off everyone. But that was a very good end result for Anadis, because that's a measure of success for small companies. If you think of it in a sense that if a biotech pharma like Roche is interested in your pipeline and your science and is willing to buy you out, right? Usually everybody makes out, very well off in Anadis, and that's what happened with most people. And then, they end up getting new jobs very quickly after they get laid off, right? Yeah,
Definitely. I mean, it's very interesting that having all that talent, because I know companies are more so about the talent and the research as well. So when acquiring, it was interesting that they laid off the talent. But I mean, you've had very unique experiences, I'm going to say, like transitioning from big pharma startups. One particular thing that is a very different experience is transitioning from like the industry to academia. What differences and difficulties did you feel you had when you were transitioning from full-fledged R&D work with professionals into teaching specifically with undergraduates?
I think the main difference that I saw, which was challenging, it was just resources. In a sense that you have, what is the most valuable resource? I guess some people say it's time. In the industry, it's finances, money, capital backing. I think both are very different. And so when I transitioned from pharma to academia, I noticed that you have to be leaner and more efficient and smarter in academia because they don't have as many resources as Pfizer did, for example, when because I can compare point to point there. So that's one thing. But it's it's just teaches you, I think, to do your job uh, better. I guess I'm an optimist. I don't like to complain. So um, you just learn to do things better, more efficiently, and you work with what you have. But that's definitely a big difference between uh, private industry, biotech or pharma companies, and academia. I think that everything else is more or less similar in my area of expertise. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so you talked about the resource difference between, I guess, biotech, big pharma, and everything versus academia, right? Let's backtrack more onto the big pharma side, on like Pfizer and AbbVie, right? You talked about how you were a senior scientist first at Pfizer and then became a senior principal scientist, and then at AbbVie you were an associate director. Overall, you were doing higher level product development, right? Could you
Yes.
tell more specifically about what those roles entailed? What was the day to day in those specific roles? What's the difference between senior scientist and senior principal scientist?
Great question, Vishnu. Yeah, I think I'd like to point out that probably one thing that was consistent between all those roles was just the fact that I was always what's called an individual contributor. For a layperson, that just means that people look at you as a subject matter expert in one particular area, essentially. And then the titles themselves, I learned not to think about those too much because they vary from one company to another, what they call a senior scientist or a principal scientist. But you're always an individual contributor. And at Pfizer, for example, when you get promoted from senior scientist to principal scientist, usually you get a larger sphere of influence. So as a entry level senior scientist, I was more or less on my own doing science and teaching science to my stakeholders at Pfizer. As a senior principal scientist, I still did that, but I had four people also helping me do the same. So I kind of expanded my area of influence in a sense, and there was no opportunity to be a director at all because the way Pfizer is structured, directors are people managers, right? And you must have the word scientist in your title to do science at Pfizer. So if all of a sudden you're no longer a fellow or a scientist, you become a director, you don't get to do science anymore. You get to just manage people.
Mhm.
That's how Pfizer is set up. Now, other companies are completely different from that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, very interesting corporate structure.
Yeah.
I wanted to compare that to how the structure works at USC. So within the academic structure itself, do you think there's corporate kind of system or roles here? Like how exactly? Because I know you were a professor here and now recently you've become the director as well. So how does that structure work?
Great question. Again, something I learned recently. This is why I really appreciate you asking that. Wasn't transparent to me as an adjunct faculty because as adjunct faculty, I was every other adjunct faculty. They are expected to have an outside job. The USC teaching is not their main job. That's part of the definition of adjunct. But once I got in, I realized that it's a very simple organizational structure at USC, at least, actually. So they have two types of tracks. One of them is tenured. Um, so that word relates to professors who run a lab and do research and train scientists while they do it. So they have usually graduate students, I should say, right? Not necessarily PhD students, just all sorts of graduate students, maybe undergrads as well. And then the other track is for teachers, right? And that's the track I'm part of. So I'm on the teaching track. So it's people who practice a professional career and teach. So a lot of doctors, pharmacists, dentists, they might also be on teaching track. So they treat patients and they teach at the same time. That's the same thing. For example, I'm a PhD, so I consult and I teach at the same time. But I do not have tenure, right? So I'm not. The university is not expecting me to do research or to train new scientists or to run a lab. That's the biggest difference. So it's just two tracks essentially. Yeah.
Okay, very cool. So you talked about the corporate structure, I guess, in bigger pharma companies and I guess in USC as well. What about Anadis? How did that work? You said you had a larger sphere of influence when you got promoted to principal scientist at Pfizer, right? Did you have a bigger sphere of influence or a higher level of this is how the company should go when you were at Anadis because it was a startup?
Oh, that's an excellent point, and I think your intuition is spot on there, Vishnu. In a smaller company, you tend to wear many hats, right? And regardless of your title or your job description, everybody does several different tasks and roles. So in a sense, you have a very important contribution to a small startup company, and that was the case in Anadis. I mean, I have never worked since that job. I've never worked in an organization where I could come out of my lab or come out of my office and see the CEO walking the hallways, and I could ask him, Dr. Xanthopoulos, that was his name, how much funding do we have left in the company? Are we gonna, finish this first phase 1 trial, or we're gonna raise more money next week? You could just talk to him casually like that. At Pfizer or Allergan or AbbVie, I never had that opportunity because those organizations are completely different and very vertically integrated. I want to say very hierarchical. Anadis was the opposite. It was, I want to say, flat, right? So very, very horizontally organized, and everybody worked on the same goal essentially. Yeah.
Okay, very cool. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I'd assume lots of people that are tuning in are interested in the recruitment process for both big pharma, where it has the vertical structure, and startups as well, when it comes to the horizontal structure. So, I'd like to know, how did you go about recruiting for Pfizer, AbbVie, Anadis, and other companies? And how was the process? And how do you think it's changed for now?
Hriday, you mentioned talent pool, right? I think all those companies want to recruit talented individuals. So you keep that in mind when you're trying to apply. So showcasing your talents is very important. I think when I did it, right, I relied a lot on identifying the talent part on my human resources colleagues, essentially. So they would do the initial screening, right, and present me with options, and then those options would have the right talents, maybe the correct degree in the right field, number of years of education, etc. Simple things like that you can tell from paper exercise. And then the part that I took interest in was actually in talking to these individuals and really learning about their personality, their work ethic, their charisma, also emotional maturity. I want to say essentially the intangibles, right? And then once I narrowed down to maybe 2 to 3 out of maybe a dozen, I would bring all of them in. Well, this took a lot of time actually. So imagine scheduling whole day interviews with 3 different individuals. Probably you have to set them up way in advance. But I would bring them in, have them meet everyone in my group, and have them give a seminar even, and then allow everybody else in the group to actually vote. So I liked them equally at that point, but then I would just get feedback from the junior scientists in my group who they liked the most. This way I would guarantee that this person was a good fit, and they would like being there. Everybody would accept them, and we would be a productive team.
Yeah, I feel like that's very, very true. It's not more so what you know, it's how you work with people that's more important as well. Because if someone knows absolutely everything but cannot work in a team, then it's more detrimental than beneficial. And just for context for our listeners, Dr. Hovik and I, before the podcast started, were talking about how grades is important factor, but not the most important thing in terms of recruiting. Because, like Professor Hovik very rightly said, it's more about charisma, it's more about the team fit, and yes, technical knowledge as well. But I feel like you can get that from experience as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. You can, and most people can also be trained. I think it's very hard to find somebody who is perfect in every aspect of the job description. Maybe even impossible. I wouldn't say that's a stretch to say. So, like you said, yeah, it's gonna be a compromise.
Definitely. I mean, okay, so how important do you think publications, presentations help with your recruitment?
This is I think my opinion maybe, but I hope most would agree with the concept. I think they're very important because publications and presentations are a measure, so a metric of, in my opinion, being able to work with other people, something you mentioned as well, right? Teamwork, collaboration, professionalism. Nowadays it's impossible. I don't see any publications these days that have 1, 2, or 3 authors on it anymore. Usually you have more than 5, maybe on average 10 people. So it just shows you that it's hard to publish something by yourself at this point. So that's just one example. And presentations are important too. I think it sort of allows the person to go off script, sort of like this podcast, right?
Right.
It's good to go off script sometimes.
Yes.
I think not everything needs to be memorized or scripted. Yeah.
And I feel like communication is a very important aspect of the industry as well, written and verbal. And I feel like both of these help with that. I mean, more so team building because these are both important skills to have. But I've often seen, even in my classes, that some of my peers are afraid to do presentations when they're up, right? So I feel like being comfortable with that is definitely a big plus point.
I agree. And personally, for me, it's just been practice, practice, practice. That's it in terms of comfort with presentations. Because even now, I'm not 100% comfortable when I'm at the podium. I'm gonna start teaching, and it's just, I guess, a subconscious self reminder that what you're doing is important. So it's not a bad thing to be nervous. It sort of keeps you alert and efficient. But with practice, it gets easier. You shouldn't be stressed out. At least that's
Yeah.
stress is not healthy, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, that
That
makes
was-
complete sense. You talked about, I guess, publications, presentations, and all of that kind of comes into academia, right? And you also transitioned from big pharmas to small pharma to academia. So, how is recruiting into being a professor? And what is the threshold of excellence to achieve to transfer from industry to academia?
My experience has been interesting in that sense. I want to say up front that I feel I'm lucky in that transition because of my strong ties over the years with USC and Keck Graduate Institute. Uh, and I never really left academia completely. So that helped a lot in the transition. But so remember the two tracks we talked about, the tenure track and the teaching track. I think for the teaching track, right, academia is looking for is people who love to be with students and train them and take satisfaction in seeing their students succeed. Besides from graduating, get good jobs and move on. I think that's really important. In the tenure track position, as I interview a lot of new professors that we're trying to recruit to USC now, since I am here, I'm interviewing them. I think what we're looking for is people who are good leaders, and they are sort of a captain of the boat. They can steer their own ship and make sure it goes in the right direction, but they are very much like individual companies within the school of pharmacy. Every professor is like a incorporation on his own or on her own, essentially. So that would be the tenure track jobs. So you have to be independent and show that you can be very successful being independent.
Yeah, definitely. So you've been on both sides of the table before you were interviewed, now you're interviewing. So, I mean, yes, the interview process does exist and we both know, but how exactly does it work? Like, what is the process like from start to end? Where do you apply? How many interviews do you have to give? And what are the chances that you'll get in or you won't get in? So, like those minute details, how does it work?
Yeah. For me, except for my USC job, the beginning has always been on the World Wide Web. Even though I'm older, I don't know which generation I'm from, Generation Y or something, but I started the applications on the World Wide Web, and they got more and more focused with my experience in time. So in other words, I would apply for a lot of jobs when I was younger. And then as I got more experience, there were fewer things I applied for. And that was by choice and consequence at the same time.
Okay.
Yeah. And then eventually it goes from an online application to a recruiter. That's what happened to me all the time. So the first point of contact has always been a recruiter.
Okay.
And then the second point of contact was usually the hiring manager. And then the last third point of contact would be in-person meeting with the larger team and the rest of the team members of that organization that's trying to hire you. That's been the industry experience.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of similarities for when you would enter into a pharmaceutical company, for example. I'm seeing a few parallels here, different rounds, the different points of contact.
Absolutely. But one thing I would recommend is if you're starting out in this field, don't get discouraged, because it is very competitive and lengthy, the process, the application process, and then the interview process and the waiting after that could also be lengthy. So it rarely happens quickly. I think there might be a difference between small companies and large companies a little bit in terms of the speed that by which they respond to people, but not so much.
Okay, that makes sense. So you
Yeah.
talked about not being discouraged and everything for people who do want to go to either academia or whatever industry that they want to pursue. Do you have any particular advice for people transitioning from industry into academia?
Make sure that you are ready for it. I think the research resources and also the teaching resources, and also just the maturity and I guess mental preparedness is going to be important before you do something like that. It's a cultural change almost, right? Where you go from a really a business mentality where in a sense you are working for a company in industry that's for profit and everything is driven by profit, no matter what everybody says. It's really profit driven. And when you come to academia, it's not. It's the complete opposite, right? I don't think anybody in USC is here to make profit. They probably do make profit, but that's not why they're part of USC. They're here for the opportunity, the freedom of expression and the exchange and the networking, maybe even the prestige and the recognition, but not to make money. You have to do that outside of this organization. Yeah.
Yeah. So you talked about, I
Yeah.
guess, being prepared, right? And making that decision. So now for the people who have made that decision, how should they approach the process? And I'm not only talking about the interview process, I'm also talking about in academia. After you've done the interview process, how do you get more comfortable with it? How do you cope with the changes from, I guess, bigger industry, business, profit mindset to the research or teaching mindset?
Yes, yes. Great question. There are a lot of resources for this available to people who make this transition. I would recommend taking advantage of them to the fullest. There are some individuals who are very comfortable on navigating the transition alone, but I don't think they're a majority of the people. So, talking to people who have the same type of job that you do, learning from their experiences, interacting with your peers, collaborating with them. I think all of these things help with the transition, and also tapping into some of these resources that I mentioned are like the teaching excellence in teaching type of programs, institutes, etc. They have a lot of different tools and progressive methods that they make available to teachers, and the same exists to the researchers who are on the tenure side. USC has a very large research center, right? I think they surpassed $1 billion in terms of research spending a couple of years ago, which was a phenomenal number to me to see that, right? I think Pfizer's R&D spends $6-7 billion a year on Pfizer's R&D, and USC spends more than $1 billion on research, right? I think that's amazing to see. So, and they have a lot of resources too for tenure track professors.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I know we talked about the change in mindset that you see from industry to academia, but I wanted to get more specific. Like, what values changed? Like, did you require more patience? Like, what skills did you develop when you were teaching, and what did you need?
Right, right. Yes, I believe that you need to be patient. You're absolutely right about that. But it's I think transitioning from that mindset of being an individual contributor that I talked about earlier, which is for science and technical expertise, to being more of a people's person, right? It's I think a teacher job for me is more from a mentorship point of view, and it's more for people development rather than science or technology development. And I think that's the part you have to be ready for as a person. That's what I had to get to as a person, to be able to walk away from the industry completely and teach. So yeah, it's almost like being a manager in a sense, right? Although I think the only difference is that my students' future is in their hands. It's not in my hands. Although I treat them like I'm their manager, but I have really no control over their future. That's a big difference, though. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting. We have a opinion-based question here. What would you say are the pros and cons of the recruitment process? And you can be completely real here. So, what are the pros and cons of the recruitment process into the pharmaceutical industry right now?
Pros and cons.
Pros and cons. Yeah.
My goodness. I think the recruitment process is transitioning to I see this in my lifetime experience. It's in a state of transition. That's a con. So they are trying to utilize some of the machine learning and AI techniques and a lot of online platforms to do the initial stages of recruitment, and it's becoming, I think, cumbersome and not very truth seeking, if that makes any sense. Pros, I believe, are that it's still a very, I want to say, healthy process in a sense from a business perspective. It's healthy because they have high turnover. That sounds like job instability. But in my opinion, high turnover is actually healthy for the business. So there's a lot of opportunities. Every time one door closes, usually two doors open. That's what I'm seeing. But yeah, I think it's just in a transition right now that they are struggling with screening and matchmaking and triage. Essentially, it has lost that human touch, I want to say, right?
Yeah.
And recruitment requires a lot of human touch. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Okay, that makes complete sense. And you kind of emphasized that recruitment is like a moving target,
Yes.
right? So, how would you recommend students keep up with those moving targets? Because as students ourselves, it is very tiring and sometimes discouraging, right? And I know as a teacher, you would have, I guess, words of encouragement and all of that stuff. So, how would you recommend? Let's go through that.
A great question. It's a dynamic process. That's what a moving target means to me. It's constantly changing. It's never in equilibrium, and you have to be at least aware of what side of equilibrium you're on at any point in time. Is it shifted one way or another way, and sort of adjust your effort accordingly. I think being aware of current trends is very important. And I call this the trifecta, but I learned to keep track of three things in the context of your question. What's going on, not just what's going on with biotech and pharma, because that seems like it's always in the news. Usually it's bad news. Sometimes it's good news, right? But the other two parts are the government and the payers, sort of. So I pay attention to what's going on in terms of Washington, D.C., policy making, things like that. That influences recruitment a lot, actually. And the third part is really my peers in academia, right? So I keep track of what other pharmaceutical sciences or pharmacology programs are doing across the country and across the world. So I look at, I work at USC, but I look at Rutgers, I look at Purdue, I look at other universities to see what they're doing, at least what they have on their website, so that I'm well aware of what's going on.
Yeah, definitely. You've dropped an amazing gem. These 3 points are something I'll keep in mind. And yeah, I mean, I actually want to travel back in time to when you were in university and you were recruiting. University days like would have been really important for you for recruitment. Can you walk us through what you did?
Absolutely. Well, when I was uh, a student, you mean, right? Just to
Yes.
clarify.
Yes.
Certainly, that was a long time ago, but I remember, right? So it was I think took a lot of time. Maybe I want to say to work with the process, right? It took a lot of time out of my day as a researcher or a graduate student. So I would spend every day maybe 1 to 2 hours sort of reading about the three things that I just mentioned and looking at then looking for job opportunities. Yeah. And and then I would sit down and personalize my presentation for each job that I decided to go after. So there was no template for this, right? And later, honestly, literally, I would customize my cover letter, my resume, and my curriculum vitae for every application. And I did this for several weeks until I started getting a response.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Uh-huh.
would you agree with me in saying it's more of a numbers game where you have to just reach out to as many people as you can and you have to put an effort into making it personalized?
Yes.
And that's what I'm seeing with your process as well, which is great to hear.
I agree.
But What were some resources that you used when you were at university that really helped you with recruitment or even opportunities that you used?
Great question. I think some of them are still around now, but the way I usually approach a problem statement is I try to find out what is the gap in my knowledge about the problem that I'm trying to solve.
Right.
And the biggest gap was always on the industry, the pharma or biotech side, because it's hard to be aware of what that sector is doing unless you know what's out there. So some of the resources I used were websites that specialized in tracking, let's say, what companies exist in the San Francisco Bay Area or Boston, Cambridge area or San Diego, just essentially like databases. And some of these websites, I believe Biospace is still around today.
Biospace.
That's one I use, but Biospace is almost like a job board, advertisement board, but I don't use it to apply for jobs. I actually use it to see what companies are out there and what they're doing.
Okay. Yeah, that's a
Right.
very interesting strategy.
Yeah.
Okay, so in terms of specific opportunities, how important did you think research was? And did you mainly spend your time doing research or were there other things too? Like, for example, how do you make yourself stand out?
Yes. My take at this might be unique to me, but I'm not sure, right? I think I did a lot of research and I published a lot when I was a student. That really stands out to me because I'm seeing quite the opposite in a lot of younger scientists that are coming out of the student pool for recruitment right now. They have one publication, maybe no publications, and when they graduate, whereas I had, pardon me, I had 5 when I graduated, 5 as a first author.
Wow,
Right.
that's very impressive.
I think so. I think that really helped me quite a bit. But I was involved in student government, for example, at USC. I was part of the graduate student senate. I served for 2 years. I did also a lot of national association work. So there is for pharmacy, right? There is this American Association of Pharmaceutical Scientists, for example. So I was a member of that. We had a student chapter at USC. So we did a lot of extracurricular programming through their influence. But yes, if you ask me, I would say publications were what made me competitive.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay. Also, I know that during your time at university, you've taken all the steps. You've gotten a PharmD, gotten your PhD as well. So I just wanted to ask, after going into the industry, was it worth getting a PhD or a PharmD, and what were the differences between them?
Great question. In looking in retrospect, I would get a PhD and a PharmD today if I could do it all over again. I would get both degrees. Just to remind everyone, I have a PhD. I don't have a PharmD.
Okay.
Right? And the reason for that is these are 2 very different degrees, I think. This is why I would like to have a PharmD now, because it gives you something that a PhD does not. They are completely, I think, different from each other. Yeah.
Okay. And could you explain more what the difference is between PharmD and PhD? And also, like, if I was a student and I haven't done either, right? I'm just out of undergrad or grad school doing my master's and stuff. And I had to choose one, either PharmD or PhD to go into the industry, right? Which one would you choose?
A great question again. A PhD, well, I chose a PhD, right? We know already. So I think that's still a great way to get your foot through the door. And it's related to the answer to your first question, right? Because the difference is that PhDs are trained to be individual contributors. So they are more of, I guess, thinkers or people that ask questions rather than provide answers or know the standard of care that's out there. That's not a PhD's job, right? Their job is more to ask questions and learn and teach. I think
Okay.
those three things. Whereas PharmDs, right, they are healthcare professionals in the verbatim, in the true sense of the definition of what a healthcare professional is. So any PharmD, I would expect them to know everything about drugs, everything about standards of care, and be able to essentially execute in a role that needs these things in the industry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Two routes you can take, and you've very rightly mentioned on how PhDs prepare you for asking questions and answering them, whereas your PharmD is more for execution. So, like, would you say these cater to different, like, either academia or industry? And also, I want to ask about the generalist versus specialist route. What degree caters to what path?
Yeah, I think, maybe here, I'll throw this out there, right? In my experience, and I think just generally today, right? If you see what sort of jobs PharmDs do in the pharma or biotech industry, they are primarily related and they exist in companies that are clinical stage, if that makes sense. Right? If a company is not a clinical stage company or even a little more advanced, meaning they have products on the market, they will probably not have any PharmDs on their staff. So hopefully you can see this contact with the patient, with the clinic, or with doctors. That's what the PharmD degree gives you.
Okay.
And I wouldn't mind having that, right?
Right.
That's a big gap that I see now, 25 years after being in biotech and pharma, right? I don't have that direct line of access to doctors or patients. That's the thing. And I forgot your second question. Sorry.
Yeah. So my second question was, how does this cater towards a generalist route or a specialist route?
Yeah. I think that's a great point, right? So um it's always good to specialize in something. It's my advice. I think of myself as a eye care ophthalmology specialist, right? And however, my degree is in pharmaceutical science, right? So that's the second one is the generalist part, right? I just happen to know a lot about eye care products that help people maintain their vision and not go blind. That's the specialist part. I think if you can understand the relationship between the two, it'll make you successful, give you a lot of comfort in how to apply and utilize your degree anywhere you go. Yeah.
Definitely. I'm finding a very interesting relation here. I thought it was like a either or. Either you could be a generalist or a specialist, but your answer right now kind of made me realize you could be both in some way. So yeah, I feel like is there like, would you say a PharmD would be more so a specialist degree? Could you make that distinction here?
Now most PharmDs that leave USC are specialists.
Okay.
And I think that's been true for more than a decade. They are either, right, I mean, they can be a specialist in infectious disease or metabolic disease or urgent care pharmacy, some sort of a clinical application. And I think as opposed to being a generalist where maybe 30, 40 years ago, you would get a PharmD and then work in a community pharmacy and or a private mom and pop pharmacy, as
Right.
they call it.
Yeah.
One of those things that is really covers the entire spectrum of medications, right? You're not a specialist in any of them. Yeah.
Okay, so you talked about the generalist versus specialist and how I guess the industry or the people in the industry are moving more towards specialist, I guess, roles. So, what do you think about the future from now of the biopharmaceutical space? And what do you think is going to be the next breakthrough?
Yes, absolutely. I think the future for me, this is something I'm interested in. Biopharmaceutics is has to do with machine learning and artificial intelligence, and what we've been talking about today as of people interested in pharmacy in general. To me, those two things come together in sort of modeling and simulation, or modeling integrated drug discovery or drug development. I think this is where the future is. And in the next 5 to 10 years, we're probably gonna see the first drug that'll get FDA approved, which was made by a computer. I think this is what's coming in the near future, actually. Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, AI is just revolutionizing everything in its path. But something that I feel like I was reading up on this earlier, and I was reading through the American Bar Association, and something I found very interesting was that in order to get a patent on a drug, the researcher and the AI tool needs to have equal contribution, which I feel like, and I don't know the numbers on this, but I know a significant amount of patent applications got rejected due to this reason. So something that's really interesting me right now, maybe the revolution is already here, it's just the regulations are holding it back.
Yes, that's a uh, great point. I don't know about this rule actually, but I think you're right. I mean, maybe the rest of the key stakeholders and clients need to catch up. In other words, right? If the industry is moving at the speed of evolution, I think the regulators, the legal people, the policymakers, they also need to make adjustments. I guess novelty, right? Non-obviousness and usefulness.
Mhm.
Sort of these are the three things that I'm not an attorney, but these are the
Right.
three things I always remember of what constitutes a good patent.
Right.
And I don't see why you cannot use AI or machine
Mhm.
learning to achieve them, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. And I wanted to ask a follow up on this. Like, in what ways do you think MIDD is contributing to personalized medicine? Because I know that's a increasing trend and the future of the pharmaceutical biotech industry, catering a drug to an individual. And how does it play a role in optimizing dosing regimens for these individual patients?
Yes, great point. MIDD, right? I think when this acronym was first introduced, somebody actually called it MBDD. So, which is machine-based drug discovery or drug
Mhm.
development. Now it's machine-informed or machine-integrated.
Right.
It's the same thing. I think in terms of personalized medicine, this is gonna be at the forefront, because I believe there is so much variability when it comes to individualizing drugs, patient to patient variability and whatnot.
Right.
That this was the gap that existed for a very long time, and AI is gonna be the way to fill in that gap,
Right.
because it allows us to very rapidly have a good understanding of boundaries between these differences. And then we can go in and actually tailor make or cater treatments or drugs that are very specific to extremely small populations of patients, and go from there. Yeah.
Okay, so you talked about the future, technically speaking, about how MIDD will increase personalization and fill in that gap, right? What about the future of your role in teaching for biopharmaceutical sciences, both in biotechnology and pharmaceutical sciences, not only teaching, but also just the academia and the tenure standpoint as well? I understand that you're on the teaching track, but what about the tenure, the research track?
I guess, yeah, are you asking me about my career development path? You're
Both
thinking,
your career
well,
development path and just the generalistic future standpoint of how your role will be.
yeah. I believe that there is going to be a need for people who can ask the right questions in academia. I don't feel like my job is to provide answers as a professor. It's more about asking questions and having that aha moment, or calling something out when it doesn't make sense, right? This is the type of characteristics or skills I want to instill in my students. right? I want them to just go out there and seek the truth, not be a walking encyclopedia or AI. That's not
Right.
that's not my job. Truth seeking is most important. I think that's the evolution of teaching, in my opinion, as a next step, because everybody is going to have data at their fingertips in 10 years from now. Right? From little kids all the way to adults, they will be probably able to instantly provide an answer to any question.
Yeah.
But the point is, what is the question and who is asking it and why? I think that's more important than the answer.
Right. I mean, these answers and insights were absolutely great. Absolutely great. I learned a lot. I wanted to move on to our next section, which is our rapid fire round.
Okay.
So we'll ask you questions. You have to answer very quickly. First thing that comes to mind. Okay. So what do you love about your role in teaching?
I love the fact that it doesn't let me get complacent in what I do.
Okay. What do you dislike about your role in teaching?
There isn't enough. There is only 24 hours in a day, and I don't have enough time.
Okay,
Yeah.
very interesting answer. What is an interesting recruitment story that taught you a lot?
I think my first job interview out of USC, what happened was I was unaware of what was going on, but I went in for an on-site interview at Anadis after passing the first few filters. And during the on-site interview, in not so many words, I was telling that company, because everybody was listening to me, that what they're doing is incorrect. It's not going to work, because I had done it and it failed. So this was my whole presentation. And then at the end of the day, they made me a job offer.
Okay, so it's not about getting it right. It's about knowing why you got it wrong, possibly.
Very well said.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great insight. Okay, what is your favorite source of biotech, pharmaceutical, or industry information in general?
I like some of these progressive blogs. I read Derek Lowe's blog. He is a former Vertex medicinal chemist. I also like John LaMatina's blogs.
Okay.
He's a former Pfizer employee. Also, I am a avid follower of these national or international organizations. So two things I follow are pharmaceutical science, which is AAPS would be my go-to place, and then eye care and ophthalmology, that would be ARVO.
Okay.
AAPS and ARVO.
Okay. Okay. Any popular websites you like? Like, I know Nature is a great source as well, right? Springer and Nature.
I love that, right?
Okay.
Nature publishers, they have a lot of areas now, different areas of
Yeah.
expertise.
Right.
Science Magazine is another one that I really like.
Science Magazine, right? Yeah.
And Derek Lowe is under Science Magazine, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And my final question to you, what is a wise quote that has stuck with you over the years?
This is a quote that was actually written in one of my high school classes
Wow.
by my math teacher. and I never forgot this from the day I read. It said, "Nothing is to be feared, it is only to be understood." And the person that said this was Marie Curie, who is the only woman that won the Nobel Prize twice.
Yeah,
Hats off to her.
Yeah.
definitely. It's a very, very insightful quote. I mean, you can apply it to so many parts of your life, not just science. Yeah.
Yes, she was probably thinking about radiation when she said this. I don't know. I'm guessing. But you're right. Yeah. I mean, I apply this to relationships, to religion, to politics,
Right.
to anything.
Right. Definitely.
Absolutely right,
Very
Hriday. Yeah.
insightful. Perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Hovik, for coming in today and being here with us. We really appreciate your unique insights that you gave today into the world of drug discovery and academia within the pharmaceutical and the biotech industries.
And thank you to everyone for tuning in to It's Bigger Than Biotech. We're thrilled to have you as part of our community, and we look forward to exploring more together. Until next time, keep curious, keep learning, and keep pushing.